Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to our show tonight. I am so excited to be here. Hope you guys enjoyed that music. I was trying to hum in my head, um, trying to go along with the beat there. Hope you guys had a great day. We're gonna have a good show tonight. I see a couple of people that are already on. Hey, Maria, how are you? Let's see. She's hi, Dr. Wood. We've got Linda who's out there. Hello, Linda. Welcome. Hope everybody had a good day and is having a great week. So we started a new week. The month is actually just flying away. The year is flying away. Last year about this time we weren't sure what we were going to be doing. And the whole COVID, and so the world's kind of getting back to some semblance of normalcy, and then we started having some of these spikes, but just excited to be here tonight. Tonight we are talking about intermittent fasting. One of there are so many fads that come on the scene as it relates to medicine, as it relates to health, and this was one that has been on the scene. Everybody's talking about it. If you go to the websites, you'll see all those things. So we're going to be talking about that today and tonight. But before that, if you know someone who has been intermittent fasting, I want you to put that in the chat. Yes or no? If you know someone who has been intermittent fasting, I want you to put that in the chat. Yes or no? Just some housekeeping. If you have a question, go ahead and put that in the chat and put a Q right in front of it so that we know that that's a question, and we'll get to those as we get into the evening. Hey, Elsie, how are you? Elsie is here. Hi, how are you? So once again, if you know someone who has been intermittent fasting or who has intermittent fasted, you want to go ahead and put that in the chat, yes or no, and that's our question. That's our question for tonight. If you are new to the channel, I'm Dr. Dwain Woode. That's Wood with an E, and the E stands for endocrinology, and I'm an endocrinologist by training. And here we create content. We do shows that help you understand your body so that you can take charge of your health and live healthy, fulfilling lives. That's what we do as we get into tonight. Hey, Linda. She said, Linda says, I have in the past. Did not help weight loss. Did not help weight loss. All right. So once again, if you know someone who has intermittent fasted, go ahead and put that in the comments, yes or no. And we want to see who's out there. Now. Maria says that she's seen someone or knows someone who has intermittent fasted in the past. Awesome. All right. So intermittent fasting, right? Intermittent fasting. What does that really mean? We're going to just talk a little bit about it and then get into some questions, okay? So intermittent fasting is a practice that many people have where they go for periods of time without eating. Okay, they go for periods of time without eating, followed by a time of eating, right? So it's supposedly intermittent. And there are some people out there who don't like the phrase intermittent fasting. We won't get into whether that's what it should be called, but that's what it is. And so we'll just kind of go with that. So intermittent fasting. So going for a period of time where you're not eating, and this is really proposed to help to support a healthy lifestyle, whether it's someone who is trying to get better blood sugars or someone who is trying to lose weight, or in some cases, there are people who do it just for the health benefits that they think they get in terms of mental clarity and increased metabolism and so forth. So lots of different things that are out there. So that's what intermittent fasting is. And typically, people will go for the most common, and we have a question here that someone put in. The most common is the 16 and 8, right? So 24 hours divided into those two sections, 16 and 8. Hey, Hazel, how are you? Hazel says, good morning. How are you? Good to see you. All right. So once again, if you know someone who has intermittent fasted or is intermittent fasting, go ahead and put that in the comments below, and we'll get to that. And if you have a question, please just put it in the chat with a Q in front of it, and we'll get to those. All right. So intermittent fasting. So we're talking about that. So that is what the intermittent fasting is, and some of the reasons that people do it. Now, the whole idea behind intermittent fasting is that we're giving the body a time where the body is not processing food, and there are several hormonal changes, enzymatic changes also, that happen in the body as a result of this. And so the idea is that during the time when you're not eating, when you're fasting, that the body is rejuvenating, the body is managing and helping some of these hormones and enzymes to work more effectively. Okay, so that's the whole idea behind intermittent fasting. There are books that have been written on it. There are apps. As a matter of fact, I signed up for an app just a couple of weeks ago so that I can see what they were doing as we get ready for this program tonight. And so there are books out there, there are websites, there are support groups, there are groups that, or one of the apps actually will send you a text when it's time for you to start eating. So lots of different ways, lots of different things of doing that. Hey Jeanette, good evening to you as well. Welcome. So intermittent fasting, and that's just kind of a background on what it is, okay? And we'll talk a little bit more about what some of the benefits are, and what are some of the things that other things that people use it for, okay? All right, so let's see. So before we go on, I just wanted to say that, as we move into our schedule, right? So we're planning to come on Monday nights at this time. Our next show is going to be next week. And tonight we're talking about intermittent fasting. And next week we're going to talk about what foods should I eat, right? And that is as it relates to either diabetes, or some of you may have hypothyroidism. Some of you may have other disease processes. And so the question is always, well, what food should I eat for better health, for managing my blood sugar? Should I stay away from, low or high glycemic index foods? So all those types of things we're going to be talking about next week. So go ahead and make sure that you are here for that. And then tomorrow night, we are doing, I met someone from one of the other channels in a group that I was in, and the channel is called Mommy Guide. And so tomorrow night at 9 p.m., our time, that's Central Time, we are going to be on Mommy Guide's channel. They are actually in the Philippines. That's right. So tomorrow morning in the Philippines at 10 o'clock, 10 a.m., our 9 p.m., we're going to be spending some time with them. So join us if you are free. We'd love to see you over there as we talk about how to prevent onset of type 2 diabetes. So that's 9 o'clock tomorrow night. All right. So back to our intermittent fasting. So one of the questions, and let's see. Jeanette says, hi, Maria. Let's get that up there. Okay. So here's, let's get Maria off or Jeanette off of there, and then we'll kind of talk about this question that we have. Let's see. So this is an interesting one, right? So if I can get, there you go. All right. So a lot of times we talk about intermittent fasting as it relates to diabetes. And here is a question. It says, I don't have diabetes. I do not have diabetes. Is there any benefit for me? And that's actually a very good question. And as I indicated before, so intermittent fasting has been proposed not just for diabetes, not just for the management of blood sugar, although it does that well. In fact, as part of our practice, we a lot of times will encourage people, or we'll present intermittent fasting as a way of helping to manage those blood sugars. But it's not just for blood sugar management. Intermittent fasting has been shown to help with weight management as well. In fact, if you look at the diets, and I don't like to use that word diet, if you look at all the diets, intermittent fasting is often listed as one of those for the management of weight. There are several places where intermittent fasting is also used for general health, well-being. So clearing the mind. Sometimes people are doing these detoxes. One of the things that sometimes is used for that is intermittent fasting. So no, it is not just for management of diabetes. So even if you don't have diabetes, it's something that can be used. Fasting goes back centuries. The history of fasting is such that you can read in the Bible, you can read in other books in history, you can go to different cultures right now, in fact, where they use fasting not for managing blood sugar or even for managing weight, but they use it as part of their cleansing process, right? And there's a whole thought process there, and maybe a question will come up, and we'll spend some more time talking about that idea. But no, you do not have to be diabetic, do not have to live with diabetes to intermittent fast. So let's see. So here's a good one. And since we're on the diabetes, theme, it says, can diabetes be reversed with intermittent fasting? So can diabetes be reversed with intermittent fasting? Once again, another one of those very, very good questions. So let's see. So reversing diabetes, that concept itself is an interesting conversation, right? And we won't get into that part of it. But when we talk about the management of blood sugars, management of diabetes, right? As I just said, intermittent fasting is a wonderful way of doing that. So that when we're managing diabetes, the idea, and we're talking specifically type 2 diabetes now, and some people who are type 1 diabetics can also intermittent fasting with care under the direction of a physician. But as we talk about type 2 diabetes, the idea is that if someone is still making insulin, right, whatever that insulin level is, how do we get the blood sugar down to a point where the amount of insulin that you're making is appropriate, right, and sufficient for what the blood sugars are? And if we can ever find that point where those two meet, right, then medication theoretically goes away. That's right. So if you can ever find that point where the blood sugars match what the amount of insulin is, then the medications and so forth go away. So intermittent fasting, because it is a way of managing blood sugar, right, it can be used to help someone get to that point. And if they are, I don't want to say fortunate, but if that happens, then medication is gone. Now, here's the kicker with the reversing diabetes, right? Just because you do not have to use medication does not mean that your diabetes is gone. Because if you go back to doing the things you were doing before in terms of lifestyle, then those blood sugars start to rise again, and we get back to those same situations, right? So it is a process of getting those blood sugars down, yes, but you still have to be very careful in how you do that, because we can run into trouble going forward. Let's see. So here's a question. Let's see. Maria says, when do we get ulcer? Right? If intermittent fasting suggests a very long time not to eat. So I think, so when do we get an ulcer? If intermittent fasting is suggesting a very long time not to eat. Okay. So very, very good question, first of all, Maria. And there are so many different components to intermittent fasting, and so many things to consider, and so many things that people have questions on. This is one of those. And so I think what Maria is asking is, if we're spending long periods of time where we're not eating, and I'm gonna rephrase this, Maria, and correct me if I'm right. She's asking, will that lead to an ulcer, right? Because the idea is that you have all of this acid in the stomach, and if the acid is there and it's not processing on food, you're not digesting food, then does the buildup of the acid cause us to have a higher propensity or higher possibility of developing an ulcer? I think that's what she's asking. If not, please correct me. But I'm going to go with that one. So when we do not put food in the body, right, the first thing that a lot of people will notice is that their stomach starts to growl, right? Right? You get that? And you're like, oh my goodness, right? So sometimes when you're at work or you're with someone, you're in a meeting, and that starts to have everybody just kind of growls, right? They just kind of stop and they pause and they wonder, did the people in the room hear that? And so part of that is the churning, right, that's going on in the stomach. There are acids that are in the stomach, and the role of acids, they are to help to digest food, but they also help to kill bacteria, right, and some other things that go on in the stomach. So when we are doing that, when we're intermittent fasting, if we're fasting and those blood sugars or that, not blood sugars, but the acid in the stomach, some people think that the acid will increase and it will eat away at the lining. But here's the fact. If you are not putting food into the stomach, over time, the stomach will begin decreasing the amount of acid that it produces, right? Because it's not expecting as much as you were putting in before. And so that process begins to happen pretty soon. And for most people, within 3 or 4 days, that growling that you were hearing on that first day after intermittent fasting, right, or after fasting in general, then they don't hear that again, right? So while it is true, Maria, that initially the acid level is there at the same amount prior to fasting, as you fast, then those levels can go down. And that's why one of the things that we recommend when people are intermittent fasting is that they drink water and they drink non-calorie containing liquids, right? So like broths and so forth. Okay, so good question. I like that. And she says yes, that is what she was asking. Okay. Let's see. Let's do this one. Jennifer says, what can cause the blood sugar to crash during the fast? What can cause the blood sugar to crash during the fast? Love it. And you guys are on it tonight. These are some of the typical questions that we will see. So during intermittent fasting, for someone who does not have diabetes, someone who is not on diabetic medication, their bodies should not drop their blood sugars should not drop to the point where they have hypoglycemia, because the body has a protective mechanism. Okay. Now, after about 7 days, then the blood sugars begin going down. But people who are on insulin, people who are on anti-diabetic medication, those medications are in the process of lowering your blood sugar. So remember, we also said that intermittent fasting helps to lower the blood sugar. So if we've got the intermittent fasting going, and on top of that we have medication that we're using for diabetes, then someone can have a low blood sugar as a result of that. Okay, that's one. The other thing is that some people have what we call reactive hypoglycemia. And so those people have a pronounced response to insulin. So when they eat, the insulin level shoots up after their food, and it overshoots, and then their blood sugar drops. So those people have to eat frequent, small, low carb, high protein meals. That's one of the things that we prescribe for them. So in those folks, initially they may have some hypoglycemia as it relates to the disease process. And there's a whole host of other things that we talk about there. But in general, if someone is not a diabetic, not on any anti-diabetic medication, insulin, and so forth, then they should not have a crash in their blood sugars. A very good question, Jennifer. Let's see. Intermittent fasting. Here we go. So Jeanette's asking the question. So she said, what's intermittent fasting and how do you fast? What's intermittent fasting and how do you fast? So as we talked about, first of all, very good question, Jeanette. And intermittent fasting is one of those things that people are using because they are trying to manage either weight, blood sugars, or some other healthy lifestyle. So intermittent, and I heard someone say that it should actually be called serial fasting, right? So you fast and then you eat, and then you fast and then you eat. But like I said, we're not going to get into what it should be called. It's called intermittent fasting. And the whole idea there is that you go for periods of time where you allow the body, right, to process the food that you have eaten. And then you have a period of time when you're eating. So let's talk about that a little bit. So the most common type of intermittent fasting is the 16-8, right? So they're 24 hours in a day. And so people go for 16 hours a day where they don't eat, and then 8 hours a day where they do eat. That's their eating period. And so, for instance, if you stop eating at 6 o'clock at night, right, that's your last meal, then 6 hours later, 6 a.m., that's your 12 hours. And then you add 4 hours to that, right? So 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 o'clock. Then you start eating at 10 o'clock, and you all of your meals that you eat have to be eaten from 10 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock at night, because that's when you're going to stop eating again, right? And so that's a common way of doing intermittent fasting. So within the 16 hours, right, there is no food or no calorie-dense, calorie-containing substances that you're eating. So no food. Even when you do broths and so forth, then you're not eating anything that has any substance, right? And part of that is to remain hydrated. And hang around to the end. We're going to talk about a couple of pointers for intermittent fasting. So that's the idea there, Jeanette. So intermittent fasting. Let's talk about a couple of the things that happen in the body. So typically when you eat food. And we're going to talk specifically carbs right now. We'll talk about some other, proteins and fats perhaps later on. But when you're eating a carb, something that has carbohydrates, when you eat that, the blood sugar rises, right? And the body produces insulin to compensate, right? So the blood sugar is going up and the insulin is being produced because the body is trying to keep that blood sugar down. And so every time you eat, if you eat carbs, then there's a spike in the blood sugar, a corresponding spike in insulin, right? And then the blood sugar comes down and the insulin goes down, right? So all throughout the day, if you're eating, you're kind of getting this, and I don't want to say roller coaster, right? I don't want to say roller coaster, but you're getting this increase in blood sugar and drop in blood sugar, increase in blood sugar and drop in blood sugar. And that's the body's process of trying to maintain good blood sugar, so good glycemic control, right? And so even if you're not diabetic, that's what happens. Every time you eat something that has carbs, the body produces insulin. The carbohydrates themselves are stored in the body if the energy is not needed. Let me say it again. If the energy is not needed, the carbohydrates are stored. So when insulin is in the body, what insulin tells the body is that, hey, I need you to store this, because insulin is an anabolic steroid, right? It is a steroid that builds up. So it's kind of like when you go to the grocery store, right? You buy some stuff and you come home. Nobody ever goes right into the kitchen and cooks all the stuff they just bought. Well, unless you went specifically for something for dinner, right? But typically what happens is you buy some stuff and then you go home and you put that stuff in the pantry, and then you take it out as you need it. And that's what insulin signals to the body. If I'm in the fed state, that is, I'm eating, the insulin says to the body to go ahead and take some of that food that you've just eaten, and I want you to store it, okay? When the insulin levels drop, as in the fasting state, then the body takes some of the stuff out of the pantry and it begins using it, okay? So if insulin's job is to take food and store it, right? Where does it store it typically? That's right here. what they said, a minute on the lips, a lifetime on the hips, right? So yeah, when you eat food, insulin is there and the food gets stored. The higher the insulin, the more storage happens. So if you think about type 2 diabetes, and let's go back to that for a minute, people who are type 2 diabetics or live with type 2 diabetes have insulin resistance. That means they're making a lot more insulin than even someone who's not who doesn't have type 2 diabetes, right? So their insulin level is higher, and so their body naturally is storing a lot more of the food that they're eating. And right, if the body has a lot of insulin or on board, it also makes you hungry. So it making you hungry. It's putting on weight, right? And that we get into that vicious cycle. And so when we fast, right, we don't put in as many carbs. If we don't put in as many carbs, the blood sugars don't rise as high. If it doesn't rise as high, the insulin level goes down. If the insulin level goes down, we're not as hungry. If we're not as hungry, the body begins mobilizing. Not if we're not as hungry, but if we're not eating, we're not putting stuff in, the body begins mobilizing the stored food, if you will, those stored energy. And that's one of the ways that we lose weight. Okay. And also that's one of the ways that we help to manage blood sugars, because you're not putting as much into the system. Okay. Does that make sense? So thank you, Jeanette. That's a very, very good question. Let's see. So that's intermittent fasting. Now there are some other fasting methods that people use. There is the once a day fasting. So everyone, they fast, and they eat a meal once a day, right? So once a day. There is the every other day fasting that some people do, and some people will fast just once a week. So there are multiple ways of doing it, and there are various reasons that people use one or the other. Let's see. How about, here's a question. Right, so this is actually what we were just talking about. What is the most popular schedule for fasting? And the most popular schedule for fasting is what we just talked about, and that is the 16 and 8. So 16 and 8 is the most popular. Then there's once a day fasting. There's every other day fasting. There's fasting once a week. And so people do those for various reasons. One of the reasons that some people would do some of the others is if they're trying to build their way up, right? So they fast once a week as opposed to fasting for 16 hours. And as you start doing the 16-hour fasting, it doesn't have to go directly to the 16-hour fasting, right? So you can fast for 12 hours and kind of build up to fasting for 16 hours. Now, most of us, if you put in the comments for me, what time do you start eating your first meal of the day? Just drop that in the comments for me. What time of the day do you start eating your first meal? Okay. Let's see. Let's grab another one of these questions here while you guys are doing that. And it says, should I take diabetes medication while fasting? Should I take diabetes medication while fasting? Oh, you guys are on the ball. I love it. And so to answer that question, let me preface it by saying that always, when you are, if you're a diabetic, we want you to make sure that you check with and talk to your provider as you are incorporating these practices, right? Talk to your provider. But in general, if you are, as we mentioned before, if we're trying to get to the point where my body is taking care of the blood sugars themselves, then as I do my intermittent fasting, it should be that we are moving in the direction that we take less and less medication. Okay, so I would not recommend going and say, okay, I'm going to start fasting tonight. I'm going to stop all my medication, right? Because even though you stop fasting tonight, your body is still has to get used to the intermittent fasting. So your blood sugars tonight, tomorrow, the next day may still be elevated, right? And so we don't want to have the situation where we are intermittent fasting and thinking that we can just not do any of our medication. But once again, just make sure that you are checking with your healthcare provider. Okay. Very good question. Very good question. Let's see. Here's a good one. So Jennifer says, with fasting, do we need to focus on protein consumption amount? Very good question, Jennifer. And we talked a little bit ago that we were going to come to protein and fat. So let's go ahead and let's put that in here. So the body processes mainly three types of substances, right? So carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. And then there are minerals and vitamins and so forth. We won't include those in this discussion. But they all provide energy for the body. So, and they provide different amounts of energy. So your protein has to be broken down in the body. It has to be processed. The amino acids have to be extracted, and then those amino acids can be turned into energy, right? The fats, you eat them, they get emulsified, they go into the bloodstream, the liver takes them, and they become, triglycerides. We add some fatty chains to them, and they get stored, right? And then the body can take those later, and it can use them as energy. So when we're doing intermittent fasting, it is so important that you make sure that you are eating all of your calories that you are supposed to get in for the day. What does that mean? So a lot of times people will try to, supercharge their intermittent fasting. So they'll say, hey, wait a minute, you know what? I'm not going to eat for 16 hours. I'm going to eat for the 8 hours. But during the 8 hours when I eat, I'm not going to eat as much. Right? So they cut back on the time of eating down to 8 hours, and they also cut back on the calories. Now, what that does, though, is it short circuits the process, because the body needs a certain amount of energy in order to work. Okay. And so if you are not putting energy in, the body, yes, will eventually convert to, glycogenolysis and gluconeogenesis, which are ways of getting energy, but it will make you hungry, right? And so you fasted for 16 hours, you've eaten for 8 hours, but you didn't get all your calories. So now you're coming back to fast for your 16 hours, and the body says, wait a minute, you didn't give me everything I needed. And so now let's go to the refrigerator and let's get something to eat. Okay, so that's the first thing. Proteins help to stabilize blood sugars, right? Because remember we said that with carbohydrates, you get this kind of process, right? You get high blood sugars, you get insulin, the blood sugars go down, the insulin goes down, you get blood sugars again, and so forth. With proteins, you don't get that, because remember the body takes a while to process those proteins. So proteins that's one of the ways that we tell people to try to make sure they're getting enough protein in, because that helps to stabilize blood sugar. It also helps with hunger, right? Because once again, the body's processing those proteins. So not necessarily that you have to concentrate on proteins, Jennifer, but we want to make sure that we're getting an appropriate amount in, and that you're eating the correct amount of calories for the day. Awesome. Love it. So let's see. So Linda says, and so this is what time do we start our first meal? Linda says 7. Jeanette says 9:30. Ruth, hey Ruth, how are you? Ruth says 9 a.m. So yeah, as a matter of fact, I usually don't start eating until 12 noon. And as a part of our schedule, I'm working all morning anyway. So I get up in the morning. I don't eat anything for breakfast typically. And I will go to work. And at 12 noon, when we break for lunch, that's when I eat my first meal. Okay. So most of us, so that was when do you start eating, right? Now in the chat, put when do you stop eating? When is your last meal of the day? Okay. When is your last meal of the day? So most of us sometimes will have approximating almost a 12-hour period where you're not eating, right? So going for the additional 4 hours for most people does not cause too much of a problem. Yeah. So here's a good one. Is intermittent fasting considered a diet or a way of life? A diet or a way of life? Good question, Jennifer. So I try not to use the word diet, okay? Because diet sometimes has the connotation of, well, I'm going to do this thing for a little bit, and then I'm gonna be done with it, okay? But for a lot of people, the management of their blood sugar, the management of their diabetes, the management of their weight is not intermittent, right? To use the same word that we're using, it's not intermittent. It is an ongoing thing, and so I like to think of. Well, let me back up and let me make another statement. One of the things that we're gonna do coming up, and you know, if you think this is a good idea, put yes, good idea or good idea. All right, we're gonna do one of these shows on diets, right? Those diets, the trend diets, and we'll talk about those. But just as a preface, so most diets work. Most diets will work. The thing is, does the diet, quote unquote, does it fit into your lifestyle, right? So if it doesn't, then you're not going to stick to it. And most people are not going to do that if it doesn't fit into their lifestyle. And when I say fit into the lifestyle, not that it has to be totally exact what you do. There are times where you will have to make some adjustments. But in general, if the diet fits into your lifestyle, most people will stick with it. If it doesn't, then no, it won't. So I propose usually intermittent fasting as a lifestyle, not as something that we do for 5 months or 3 months or 4 months. For most people, once they are able to incorporate it and once they get going, then intermittent fasting is really something they can adopt as a lifestyle way of doing things, right? Lifestyle way of doing things. So let's see. We've got Linda says 2000. So is that 8 o'clock? I think, right? 8 o'clock at night. Ruth says 5 p.m. And so this, I think they're talking about when do they eat their last meal. Okay. Now, you know, I've got to, let me tell on myself, right? So I stay up late at night, and I'm here, I'm doing things, I'm on video, I'm doing recordings, and so when I stay up late at night, I have a tendency to eat late at night. So once again, right, intermittent fasting and all the diets that we do have to kind of fit into your lifestyle. Now, one of the things that I am working on is getting to bed earlier, right? Notice what I'm doing. I am not saying, well, I can't do intermittent fasting because, hey, I stay up, I have to stay up. There are times when there are things that I'm doing late at night that I can probably do later on, right? So I'm working. I've got an alarm on my phone that goes off. It goes off every night. I don't follow it every night, but it does go off. And so there may be some adjustments that we have to make if we're trying to incorporate intermittent fasting. Okay. Let's see. Jeanette says 6 p.m., but sometimes I get hungry during the night. Very good point there, Jeanette. And I think this goes back to what we were talking about before, that with intermittent fasting, we want to make sure that we're eating all of the calories. If we're not eating all the calories during our time of eating, our eating time, then during our fasting time, the body's going to make you hungry, right? Because it says you didn't give me all the fuel that I needed, right? And so we get that kind of sound, right? Ghrelin is out there. It says that's one of the hormones. It says we're hungry, and so we go and we start grabbing things. Okay. Now, one of the interesting conversations to have, and we won't spend time to get too much into that now. One of the interesting conversations to have is how long can someone actually go without eating? Yeah, that's an interesting one, right? Because the excess fat that we have, right? The fat that we carry, right? The fat that's above our ideal body weight. Those are calories that the body has stored. Remember we talked about the whole pantry thing? Yeah, right? So your body has calories on board that it's storing. And so if I already have calories on board, right, how long can I go without having to eat anything? Because if we can figure that out for a lot of people, right, if you can go that period, guess what? The body starts to burn those calories, right? And so part of intermittent fasting is to give the body a period of time where, and usually within about 12 hours, right, the glycogen. And so let's talk about that process. So your body, when you eat food, carbs, for example, let's take that. And I know I keep talking about carbs, but it's probably the one that most people understand the most. So when we eat carbs, the body takes some of the food and it stores it. And it stores it as glycogen. Glycogen is, you could think of it as kind of like a tree, right? And the body takes a piece of food, carbohydrate, and it just hangs it on that tree, right? So if you look at glycogen, it has kind of these, looks like tree-like structure. And so the body takes that and it's in the liver. So when you stop eating at about 8 to 12 hours, your body says, wait a minute, they're not giving me any more food. So it switches from the fed state to the starvation state or fasting state. And during that time, it gives you back glycogen. So the glycogen comes out. If no more food comes, then it goes into gluconeogenesis. So gluconeogenesis. So so new glucose, genesis creating. So the body's creating new glucose. So what does it do? Well, it goes out and it finds amino acids from your body. And it takes those amino acids and it creates new sugar, glucose with it. And then that body uses that. Now, notice what I said. It takes 12 hours before the liver stops producing or stops giving you back the glycogen, and then it switches to gluconeogenesis, and it goes through that process. And it has to go through that process, and then it gets to burning fats, right? So triglycerides. It takes those triglycerides, it breaks off the fatty acids, so now we got the glycerol, and we've got the 3 fatty acids that are coming around, and then the body begins burning that. So it has to go through a process of doing that. So yeah, so we're good. So once again, you've got to make sure that you're eating all the calories. So Danita says 6:30. 6:30 is when she eats her last meal. Okay, very good. I like that. All right, let's see. Let's get to some other questions. How about, let's see, what do we have? Should I take my medicine? We already talked about that one. We talked about the ulcers. Here's one. This is a long one. All right, here we go. It says, I am not a big eater. My eating issue is probably more involves skipping meals than overeating. I'm having a really hard time with eating regularly scheduled balanced meal. I really don't want to gain any weight. Am I the only one? Am I the only one? Is there a way past the mental block? Wow. There's so much in that question there. So much in that question. So I'm gonna take it off screen, but I'm gonna keep it here so I can address several of those things. So first of all, I do agree, and let's just say, let's put it out there that a lot of what happens is mental. So when we eat, right? And a lot of times we say, okay, we got to eat breakfast, we got to eat lunch, we got to eat supper. Okay. Now, why do we do that? Is it that the body's telling us to eat breakfast, lunch, and supper? Do you think that? No, it's not that the body's telling us to do that, but we have been conditioned to do that. Conditioned. Oh yeah. Right. So let's come off of that for a minute and let me give you an example. Right. So you are sitting at home and you just finish eating. Say you're with your family and you've just finished eating dinner, and a friend comes over And this is, I was going to say pre-COVID, but a friend comes over and they say, hey, I got to talk to you. I guess something's going on, da, da, da. And hey, let's go down to where? What's your favorite place? Let's go down to Starbucks. Let's go down to Panera. And you get to Panera, you're sitting down. Or you can go to the bookstore, right? Barnes & Nobles, you're sitting over there. What do you do? That's right. Yeah, we get something to drink. We get something to eat. Why? You're full. You just finished eating, right? But we're conditioned in those social situations that food is involved, right? I remember when we found out that we were having a baby, we celebrated, right? We ate, right? We celebrated, we ate. And a lot of people, you get the little envelope and you put the name in there, and or you get the doctor to put the gender of the baby in. You do that gender reveal. What do you do at those occasions? Yeah, you eat, right? And then it's time for baby is born, right? So everybody's excited and baby's there, and everybody starts to come over. And what do you guys do? Yep. If you're like us, we eat. And then it's time for christening the baby, blessing the baby. Everybody comes over, and what do? We eat, right? So a lot of our social situations are surrounding food. And so this idea of eating breakfast, lunch, and supper is part of that, okay? And so when we have periods of time where we are not eating, part of it is the conditioning that we're used to, that the body is making us do that, not because we're hungry, but it's something that we do. It's I got to eat breakfast. Well, why do you have to eat breakfast? Right? If you're eating a balanced diet, right, you don't have to necessarily eat breakfast, and there's a whole host of things that go into that. All right, so let me pause here for a minute and let me talk a little bit about if you've not already done so, if you've not subscribed to our channel, we are excited about what we're doing, right? So we make content. This is what we do to help people understand their bodies so that they can take charge of their health, and so they can live healthy, fulfilling lives, avoiding complications. If you've not already done so, check us out on our social media, LinkedIn, TikTok. We've done some TikTok videos. You'll like those. One of them, you see me kind of doing a little dance thing there. Of course, on our YouTube channel, we do this every Monday night. And you will also see some other pre-recorded content that we have that we'll be putting out as we kind of flesh out what we're going to be doing on the channel. Twitter, right? On Twitter, if you're looking for some ideas on there's some recipes out there, how to exercise, some motivational thoughts, all of those are there on Twitter. So just go ahead and check us out. And it's Dr. Dwain Woode at all of those social media things. And then buy me a coffee. If you like what we're doing, you want to support our channel, buy me a coffee is a place to do there. buymeacoffee.com/Dr. Dwain Woode. And then if you have something that you'd like to say to us, you don't want to do that in the chats. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to connect with you. And that's drdwainwoode@gmail.com. Okay. All right. So that's our little commercial. So back to this question, right? So it's a mindset. It's a mindset thing. We don't want to gain weight. And so there are all these struggles that we have. I'll tell you, one of the most interesting things that can happen as we go through this process, and we'll talk, and as we go through, we'll share some more of our journey, is when we begin to understand a lot of our interactions with food, why we do the things that we do, why we eat the things we eat. A lot of it does not have to do with being hungry, right? Like I told you before, I'm up late, so I'm eating. We were traveling recently, and I was trying to stay awake. And what was I doing while I was trying to stay awake? Yeah, I was snacking, right? So there are all these things that happen, and we'll get more and more into some of those. All right. Let's see. So that was that question. All right. So lots of stuff that's going on there. Now, what I want to do is and give me just a second. Let me grab something. So I wanted to pull out my journal because I made some notes that I wanted to share with you guys just quickly. So when we talk about intermittent fasting, right? When we talk about intermittent fasting, one of the things that we did talk about just now, and this is just some tips for you. So when we talk about intermittent fasting, remember you want to make sure that you are eating all of your calories, right? We mentioned that earlier. If you go to our TikTok, Dr. Dwain Woode at TikTok, we did one on intermittent fasting, and one of the key points is making sure you're getting all those calories in, because if you don't get those calories in, then it can cause problems for the intermittent fasting. Okay, you want to make sure that you're drinking water, right? Because one of the ways that you get water is with eating food. So if you're not eating during those 16 hours, right, you're getting dehydrated as time goes on. And dehydration also can sometimes feel to people like, like they're hungry, right? So making sure that you're getting enough water in. Making sure that you are, and this was a question I think that Jennifer asked, making sure that you are getting enough protein in, right? Because if you don't get enough protein, you will get the fluctuations in blood sugar, and every time your blood sugar drops, right, you what? Yeah, you feel like you're hungry. Or every time the insulin goes up as well, you feel like you're hungry. Making sure that you are being flexible, right? So if your husband, wife, daughter, son, somebody in the family has a birthday and you guys go out to eat, guess what? That's probably a time when you can change the schedule, right? So once again, everything, all the diets, all the lifestyle things that we do work if they fit into our into our schedule. So sometimes people make it so rigid that they that they get frustrated, right? Because everybody's sitting at the table, everybody's eating, I can't eat, and so be flexible in what you're doing, right? If you're not getting enough sleep, right? Okay, let me raise my hand. Right? If you're not getting enough sleep, then lack of sleep sometimes will show up as hunger. And so when you feel like you're hungry, guess what? Yep, the body will say, no, let's go get something to eat. So all those things will cause problems. Those of you who drink coffee, right? If you're drinking coffee and you are putting cream in the coffee, or if you're drinking tea and you're putting sugar, right, then that can also short circuit, because there is this thing that happens whenever you get sugar in, whenever you get anything that has carbs in your body, that triggers something in our satisfaction, right? So it triggers dopamine, and so that pleasure center, and guess what that establishes? It establishes a pattern, right? So, oh, that tastes good. Oh, that quote unquote made me feel good, right? And so, oh, let me get some more of that. And so, have you noticed that sometimes if you haven't eaten anything that has carbs, right, that you're able to, it's okay. You go on and you do your thing and everything is great. But the moment, that's right, the moment you put something in your mouth that has carbs, what happens? There you go. You want something else. You want another piece of carbs, right? Let's see, what else do we have here? If you are, so we just talked about the carbs. So if you're eating carbs and you're eating high carbs, right? So not just away from the coffee and the tea and so forth, but if you're eating now and your meal is heavily carbs, then that's going to make your body want more carbs. Okay, so make sure that you're being careful with all of those things. Awesome. All right, so I am so excited that you guys were here. It's 5 minutes to the hour. Just excited you're here. And if there are other things that you want us to talk about, please, we are always interested in hearing your thoughts. Drop those in the comments. Drop us a line on our email, like we said, Dr. Dwain Woode at gmail.com. We talked about all of our social media places that you can go and see us. And just thank you all for coming out tonight. And